Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly break down how Chelsea overcame Newcastle's narrow defense to claim another victory at Stamford Bridge. But before we do that, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/footy analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. But now, let's get to the starting lineups. We look at Chelsea more of a 4-3-3. Hudson-Odoi, Tammy Abraham, and Willian up front with Barkley, Jorginho, and Mason Mount in midfield. Then we move to Newcastle, 5-4-1. Joelton up front, out in the wider areas, Saint-Maximin and Almiron with the Longstaff brothers in midfield, and out in the wing-back roles, they have Williams and Yedlin. So now let's get to the first half, see how Newcastle approached the game and how Chelsea aimed to break them down. So when we break down Chelsea against Newcastle, we knew how the template of this match would shape out. Newcastle sitting deep, possibly looking to break on the counterattack. Chelsea forced with the task of having to break them down, create chances, and claim 3 points. When we look at the board and break it down, like I said, Newcastle dropping off into a 5-4-1. You have the midfield bank tucking in very narrow, and you have Joelton trying to track the movement of Jorginho as he is the spare man from deeper positions. Newcastle try to close down from the front quickly, more so not Joelton, but once the ball got into the midfield zones, they were looking to close. They had the Longstaff brothers who should be tasked with Barkley and Mason Mount, who are obviously looking to break forward. They had Almiron and Saint-Maximin stepping out to Alonso and Azpilicueta, and ultimately that does leave Tammy Abraham in a 3v1 situation against the center backs, as you have Hudson-Odoi and Willian moving out into the wider areas, holding the touchline, providing the width, trying to go 1v1 in those situations. And that's technically Chelsea's aim, to get the ball out to those wider players. Because like I said, you have Abraham outnumbered 3v1, and the only way he can really get service there is if he gets production from the wider areas. So that's Willian, who is going to cut down the byline from the right-hand side to possibly deliver crosses, or Hudson-Odoi taking on Yedlin, which is possibly Newcastle's weak link if he's in a 1v1 situation, to either drift to the left and deliver a cross, or cut in and try and shoot from the right. That's where they're going with it, because when you look at the midfield options, Barkley and Mason Mount were often looking to find space in those pockets, and they were often sitting between the lines. But because Newcastle's shape was so compact, it was very tight in those zones, and Jorginho couldn't play passes into those areas. So what you would possibly expect them to do is make late runs into the box, try to offer another threat to that center back trio, and possibly combine with Abraham. But like I said, they dropped off a bit narrow. Chelsea weren't getting any production from Alonso or Azpilicueta because they were getting closed down, and crosses more so from Azpilicueta weren't connecting with teammates. And you had Tomori and Zuma with time on the ball to push forward to make things happen. Jorginho was key throughout this game because as it wore on, he was in deeper positions. No one was picking him up ahead of the Longstaff brothers, and he was able to play passes into key areas. But in the first half, most of his passes were going out into the wider areas. So when you really break that down and you assess how Newcastle is set up, like I said, the key areas out in the wider zones, and that is where their best chances came from. It was Hudson-Odoi taking on DeAndre Yedlin, cutting in and making things happen. When we look to 3 basic examples, you have Ross Barkley, who has his pass deflected by Longstaff, and it falls into the path of Hudson-Odoi, and he's able to cut in on Yedlin, locates a run from Mount that takes out Lascelles, and he locates Willian peeling off Clark. So when Hudson-Odoi delivers that cross into the box, Willian is able to get onto it, but he nods his effort wide. Shortly after that, we have Jorginho in Newcastle's third, and he delivers a diagonal ball over Almiron into the path of Hudson-Odoi in left half space. Hudson-Odoi locates Mason Mount making a run ahead of Schär and Lascelles, with Abraham ensuring that Lascelles has to stick to him. And what we see from Hudson-Odoi is that he splits Yedlin and Almiron to find Mount ahead of the center backs, and he turns and fires a shot on goal that Dubravka does push away. When we look to the final example, it's Marcos Alonso ahead of Almiron in a narrow position, and he ends up sliding the ball out to Hudson-Odoi in the left-handed zone. And what he's able to do is able to cut in on Yedlin and Sean Longstaff to deliver a cross out into the right half space for Willian, who this time decides to cut in on Willems, and he drags a shot quickly inches wide of the near post and side netting. So you're seeing how Chelsea's able to create their chances, getting the ball out to Hudson-Odoi. He's able to make things happen, but they're not really testing Dubravka besides that run that Mason Mount made to turn and fire a shot at the keeper. Chelsea were looking to press from the front, and Newcastle were unable to really build plays out of the back because they had the front three stepping to the back three. They had the fullbacks pushing out into the wider areas to close out the wing backs, and they had Mount and Barkley stepping to the Longstaff brothers. That leaves Jorginho and the center backs available to deal with the threat of Almiron and Saint-Maximin looking to break into the channels as Newcastle can play the ball into Joelton. And as we saw throughout that first half, Almiron and Saint-Maximin did have their chances to break on the counterattack, but when they got into that final third, they were unable to test that Chelsea backline. When we quickly look at that, what we end up seeing here is Alonso trying to clip the ball over Schär for Mason Mount making the run. Schär ends up winning the header and he nods it to Yedlin, who guides it into the path of Sean Longstaff, and he directs the ball into Joelton, who is dragging out Tomori. What we end up seeing here is that Joelton's very good with his back to goal, and Alonso gambles. And once Alonso gambles, that creates space for Almiron to break free, and Joelton knows this and he splits them. You have Almiron breaking across, you have Zuma who does cut in, and when Zuma comes across, Almiron's able to skip by him, and Alonso gets across on the recovery, and he does pull him down, but there's no call there, and Chelsea get away with it. We look to another opportunity as Ross Barkley with a loose pass, and it does fall to Saint-Maximin, who's able to break forward past Mason Mount, run at the center backs, and he ends up sliding the ball out to Joelton, who is breaking across the defenders in Tomori. When he is able to cut in on Tomori, what happens there is that Zuma comes across and makes a last-ditch sliding tackle. One more example does see Tomori give the ball away when Joelton does pressure him, and he guides the ball over Jorginho when it falls to Almiron, who ends up sliding it to Matt Longstaff, and he ends up sliding the ball out to Saint-Maximin, who delivers across to the far post beyond Marcos Alonso for Joelton, but he nods his effort wide of the net. So you see how Newcastle are going about their business and getting close to goal with their direct running, but it was Chelsea who were creating the better chances. And when we move to the second half, we did see a change in Chelsea's setup because it did see Mateo Kovacic come on towards the end of the first half to replace Ross Barkley, and now Chelsea were more of a 4-2-3-1. Then we saw Jorginho get more time on the ball, and Chelsea were still operating in the wider areas. When we look to their examples and to see how they're able to get beyond this Newcastle backline, a lot of it stemmed through Jorginho's passing and direct running. When we look to the first example, it's Willian out on the right-hand side in the wide area, and he drags out Willem and Saint-Maximin. What he ends up doing there is that he ends up dropping the ball into the space of Jorginho, and Jorginho is now able to split the Newcastle defense and find Azpilicueta in a narrow position in right half space. Azpilicueta does fire his cross through the 6-yard box. No one attacks it, but we do see Schär clear it away, and that's one chance that we see them getting into good position. Shortly after that, it's Jorginho again, cutting across the Longstaff brothers, and he locates Mount, making another run off of Clark. When he makes the run off Clark, Jorginho does find him, but Mount is unable to bring it down and create anything out of it, and he ends up guiding the ball out for a goal kick. But like I said, Jorginho finding space in that deeper position, Mason Mount continuing to provide energy and second runs from midfield into the box, but unable to make the difference. And then we saw a glimpse of what Willian started to provide in that second half. Opposed to trying to drive at Willem, he ended up cutting across midfield and the two center midfielders to just slide the ball out to Hudson-Odoi, who's able to go 1v1 with Yedlin, but again, getting across and delivering a low ball through the box that evades everyone. So Chelsea are getting into good areas, but unable to connect with their teammates in the final third. And then we see another change from Lampard. He brings on Pulisic, Mount comes off, and now that it adds another additional runner that's able to dribble the ball and combine with teammates in those tight spaces, and that is what eventually broke down this Newcastle backline. When we look to how Pulisic and Willian, with the combination of Jorginho's passing, stopped Newcastle, we see Willian breaking from his half and cutting across Matt Longstaff and sliding the ball out to Hudson-Odoi, and again 1v1 with Yedlin, cuts in on him, but he fires his shot off Lascelles, and it ends up breaking into the path of Pulisic, breaking in across from Williams, but he fires his shot on goal and he's unable to beat Dubravka. Then we see a change. We end up seeing Andy Carroll come on, which pushes Joelton out into a wider zone, but Chelsea continue to harm them. This time it's Jorginho from deep, and he ends up locating the run of Marcos Alonso, and he clips the ball over Yedlin, and Alonso ends up nodding it across the center backs and beyond Clark for Willian breaking into the box, but again, unable to beat Dubravka. Then we get to the winner, and we see Jorginho dropping off ahead of Matt Longstaff, and he ends up splitting Longstaff and Joelton to find Pulisic in a narrow position. We wouldn't get this from Mount, because what happens after that is that Pulisic runs at Clark and Willems, and he ends up pulling the ball back into the path of Hudson-Odoi ahead of Yedlin. Abraham dragged out Schär, and Saint-Maximin doesn't track the run of Alonso because Hudson-Odoi lays it off to Alonso, who fires a low, powerful effort past Dubravka. He should save it, he doesn't. Chelsea are up in front, but again, direct running, Jorginho's freedom, and you have that Hudson-Odoi against Yedlin battle, and that is the difference here. We do have one more opportunity where Chelsea should have doubled their lead, and again, it's great direct play from the Blues. When we look at it, it's Jorginho dropping off the ball to Kovacic, and he's able to skip past Matt Longstaff, and he bypasses Sean Longstaff to play a pass into Pulisic, who drags out Clark. He ends up laying the ball off to Kovacic, who ends up skipping past Clark and Schär, and he locates the run of Pulisic and Abraham, making it in between Willems and Lascelles. When he pokes the ball into the path of Pulisic, he ends up playing the ball across Lascelles for Abraham, who should have an open net, but Yedlin comes across to make a last-ditch block, and Chelsea are unable to double their lead, but the game was secured after that. When you break it down as a whole, Newcastle had a plan. It worked well against Manchester United, but here against Chelsea, they had the 1v1 battle with Hudson-Odoi against Yedlin that did work out. When William cut in centrally to pull out markers, it allowed Hudson-Odoi to get more of those 1v1s. Jorginho eventually got freedom to impact the game, and Pulisic moving to a central role gave them another direct runner, and that caused Newcastle's backline so many issues that they couldn't deal with. But let me know what you guys think. Will Newcastle stay out of the relegation zone this season? And what about Chelsea? Finding good form under Lampard, will they finish in the top 4? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.